Hello and welcome to the DM's Travel Book Club, a guide to Faerûn, where we take a whistle-stop tour around the Forgotten Realms, see the sights, meet the people, and discover hidden treasures. Woo! We're back. My name is Fiona, and with me, as always, on our Travel Book Club excursions is the wonderful Hamilton. Say hello, Hamilton.
Hello, Hamilton.
Very good.
All right.
This is the beginning of what is going to be a very long trip, I think.
Yes.
We're starting with the dad jokes early.
Oh, well, I mean, where else do you start? You need to give
Indeed.
people know what they're getting into early on so they can either tune in and go, well, I want more of this, or
Exactly.
yeah.
Indeed. Well, if you've been with us before, we've had our own travel book clubs. We were sort of further out. We were around to the inner planes and outer planes. We still have various planes of existence to look at, the ethereal.
Loads.
Uh,
There's endless. It's
endless planes. But we thought, you know what? It's been a while since we've done a little bit of traveling. So we thought, why not we come back down to Earth, literally.
Yes.
And with a new campaign setting, sort of reimagined, revised for 2024 edition of D&D, we thought, why don't we finally start back where a lot of people do their D&D games in Faerûn, the Forgotten Realms. Hamilton, what do you know of the Forgotten Realms?
What do I know about the Forgotten Realms? Well, the Forgotten Realms was my first real introduction into D&D because I bought a Forgotten Realms novel when I was like very young, and then that was before I got into playing games in Planescape. But yeah, so that was my first intro into it. I mean, obviously, I've spent time doing Dragon Heist, where that's all in Waterdeep. I've read a lot of the Dritz novels, which all feature within Menzoberranzan, the Icewind Dales. They go to Luskan, they go to Silvery Moon, even Kalimshan. So I've been around, and I've read a few of the sort of Forgotten Realms sort of guides and books in my time. We've also played Baldur's Gate 1, 2, and 3, and and so and obviously seen the movie and Neverwinter. So lots of, it's so pervasive because it is like the default, even though Greyhawk was the original one. Forgotten Realms is the prime. It's the prime one for a lot of campaign settings.
For a lot of people, as you said, it is that intro into it. And yeah, I think I'm the same. I feel like I don't know anything about the Forgotten Realms other than the little bits that we've done. But actually, we have done a fair bit as well. Like we looked at Fae in our normal book club a little while ago. We've done Waterdeep, as you said. I even looked a little bit at Baldur's Gate as well. So it is pretty much, if you have started in D&D, you've most likely interacted with the Forgotten Realms. I think like Mines of Phandalin, the big starter adventure that everyone loves, that's set quite close to the Dalelands. So again, it's also there. But like you might be here like after listening to our Eberron series and be like, oh, Eberron was really cool, and we were like, yes, it was.
Yeah, I mean, Forgotten Realms is so much more your de facto D&D vibe as well, in the sense of like what I mean of like it's high-ish fantasy-ish. But it's still like very generic. It fits with all the kind of things you would expect for fantasy to be. But then with the areas that then give you a little bit of differentiation, I think is like the really cosmopolitan areas that the Forgotten Realms has that maybe wouldn't exist in some other fantasy realms. So if you think of like Lord of the Rings, everything that's cosmopolitan is pretty much like a dying empire, you think of Gondor, etc., like those sorts of places. Whilst here, places like Waterdeep, Neverwinter, Silvery Moon are all like really, and Cormyr as well, other places there are all like really bustling, thriving cities of industry and culture and trade, and are also more probably bordering on Enlightenment era kind of vibes comparative to the more medieval era vibes that you have in other places. It's definitely like maybe like early Enlightenment, but it's like there's like inventions and there's magical, because of magic it kind of has like much more like vibrant and more modern culture that you might expect than you would find in sort of more traditional fantasy novels or like medieval space novels, I guess. So it kind of has that really good, it's got its own vibe because of that, I feel, the Forgotten Realms comparative to other places.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it says here, like Faerûn is filled with rich history and wondrous tales of adventure and magic, but the everyday to day life in Faerûn is that of a medieval society. So again, like it's just adding that little bit of wonder to it. We've got stuff like here. It says like rural farmers grow food and herd livestock that gets sent to markets and towns and cities where crafters and other tradesfolk gather. News and gossip are carried by caravans, ships, and traveling minstrels, and adventurers always spread news as well when they're not creating it, which I always think is quite. It's like, there's the gossipiness.
100%. I think that's very true. And as I said, I think that's the general for everything. But when you hit the big cities, it definitely I feel it steps up from that medieval society, because then you have clerks and sort of like every day you have like, particularly in Waterdeep, where they've got all the different trade unions and stuff like that as well. And like you have to join the different guilds and everything. And so it's still kind of medieval, but it feels, I don't know, it feels a little bit more.
There's modern touches to it.
A bit more modern touches and stuff like that, which I think is interesting. But yes.
Yeah, and also, at some point, I'm sure we will talk about the different gods that live here, the various factions you might come into contact with as well. Because again, just to get yourself grounded, because it's very much, if we give you a book to be like, here, this is all you need to know, and you look at it and you go, that's a lot of dates. As a lot of names, like, how do you ground yourself in this sort of thing? So we're both coming at this not as experts, obviously, and this is our big disclaimer at the top. Turns out there's a lot of stuff on the Forgotten Realms, like not just from this edition, obviously many, many other campaign settings, and we're going to try and supplement our readings with this stuff as we can. But naturally, I think the big thing, like you and I were discussing, is that in this campaign setting, it only really focuses on like a couple of places of interest where most likely people are going to be setting their adventures. That doesn't mean it's the be all and end all of Faerûn and Forgotten Realms. I think I think what we're planning is using these particular settings, the setting primer, as it were, to launch our own knowledge off into it, and then maybe later on go to these other places like the north, maybe even the far reaches. Like there's all sorts of things we were sort of divvying, going like, this is really interesting, but there's not much in this particular 2024 campaign setting book. Exactly. So just again, it's a big heads up. We are aware because we're not experts at all, but I just wanted to I don't want people to be like, well, they said this, but actually there's 4 or 5 like 100-page books, and we're like, no,
oh my god, we're very much aware of all these, and like from all the way back in 1E, because this is a really old campaign setting, and as we said, it's been one of the foundational ones for D&D throughout its history, pretty much. And I think and I think even we've talked about, and actually I'm adding this on air, but I think like there's other areas of Faerûn that we could even talk about, like the Spell Plague, which is a really interesting, earth-shattering event which is very interesting, how it completely upended the sort of a lot of different places. So that could even be something we look at, and I think that's the point. We're going to use that adventures in Faerûn as a launch pad. But yeah, we've already got some books, and we already know about loads of other books and places that, like I've always mentioned to you, like Luskan is a really interesting place where you've got these pirate kings that rule the city, and then also there's the host tower of the arcane host tower, where there's like these 2 warring different rulerships in a very small city, which has got interacts with Jarlaxle, who's a really interesting character, and that sort of, and how that's trying to get Luskan into the High Lords of the High Lords Alliance, which then creates you a whole new aspect into Waterdeep and Baldur's Gate and all those great places. So there's like you touch on even on like a city, and then you unravel these threads that then find you going down a 100-page book, as you said, all just for one piece of information. So I think we will try our best to explore as much of the realms as we can, but knowing full well it's impossible in a lifetime probably to do all of them.
Right, exactly. And I think this is what I think maybe could be cool to guide us, certainly for a travel book. So like, what interests us? You said, as mentioned, Luskan there. Like, I'm a big fan of like Chult. I want to find out more about Chult, because I feel like there is stuff out there on it. We recently looked at Netheril as a free supplement for our usual DM's book club, and obviously that's not really particularly in these campaign setting things either, but that was a really interesting that's a really cool thing to find out. Fae we looked at before, Waterdeep, as you mentioned. Menza Baranzan I'd love to track out more if we're able to, because I really enjoyed when we started doing the Drizzt novels. So
100%.
That's the sort of thing, is that we're very aware that they'll be like, well, this is my favorite city and you haven't covered it, and I'm like, too bad. I think is the way to think about it
as well. If there is a favorite city that people are like, you need to look at this one, this is the really interesting one, you don't know about this, we have a Discord. You can go into our Discord. You can also find us at the little like links that you can see, our little handles down below, and there'll be also show notes where you can get to all these things and message us and say, by the way, I love Athkala, that's the one to look at. Or no, you need to go to the old empires, by the way. Did you know about this? And you're like, oh, okay, this is interesting. So, lead us on paths as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's an open, like, the book clubs are always open to suggestions. There's no strict curriculum. We just start off with one strict thing, is that we're going to do this book, and then we'll see what else is going on to give us starting off points. I guess the thing to sort of note in general, as a sort of way to sort of get us into it, is that in Faerûn we have sort of various regions, and I think it's a good way just to quickly just mention them as a way to be like, because again, as we said, it could be very overwhelming, but that's 10 regions that the Forgotten Realms are sort of split off into. This is where, obviously, another disclaimer, our pronunciations may not be correct.
They may vary.
They may vary from region to region. So the first one here is Anorok, which is the inhospitable desert and adjoining glacier that is home to nomads and crisscrossed with trade caravans. We have the Arcane Empires, which has got 3 realms set in the east of Faerûn, which is wielders of arcane magic. So we mentioned Thay earlier, but then we have the Rashomon and Algoron, she says, question mark, do you know?
Aglarond.
We'll say, we don't know.
That's what I mean.
But again, master witches in the Rashomon and sorcerers in Aglarond, perhaps. And obviously the Red Wizards of Thay. Then we've got the Forgotten Lands. In the remote northeast of Faerûn is home to vast mineral wealth and long-lost magical secrets. Then we have the Heartlands, the rich, powerful realms of Cormia, Sembia, surrounded by the frontier settlements of the Dale Lands, which there's a lot of Dale Lands, it turns out. So
They've
many
used Dale
small
a
Dales.
lot.
Very Dale heavy, I believe.
Dale heavy.
Right? Which makes
Dale
sense
coded.
as an introduction. Dale coded. We also then had the Lands of Intrigue, which is the realms of Am, Kalimshan, and Tethra, which they've not been warring for centuries at each other, but they also had a long history of political schemes. Very fun. Most people will have heard of the North. These harsh weather, underdark menaces, and isolation threaten the people of Icewind Dale and other settlements in dangerous and unforgiving land. We then have the Old Empire, these ancient realms of Chesenta, Mulhorand, and Unether. For better or for worse, they've been ruled by living gods, which is fascinating. I think a lot of the stuff we were looking at in the Planescape. The Planescape setting would have references to lots of maybe real world religions, sort of ancient religions of Egyptian and Norse. So maybe we're going to see something like that there. Again, who knows? Sword Coast, obviously everyone knows the Sword Coast. The largest and most well-known cities in Faerûn lie along the west coast, tied together by trade and history. Then we have something that's very new to me, the Trackless Sea, islands of island nations isolated from each other but are united by their dependence on the sea. And then we have Vilhorn Reach, the Emerald Enclave's mystical land of, how do you pronounce that
Illichon.
Illichon.
Yeah.
Illichon lies at the entrance to the Vilhorn Reach. Wielding arcane magic is a crime in most places here, because obviously it's more about nature. Again, maybe we'll come to talk about what the Emerald Enclave is about. If you've seen, I think in Honor Amongst Thieves, there's a little mention of them there.
Yes, the Druid character is part of the Emerald Enclave, and you kind of go to one of their sort of like camps, don't you, in it?
That's what it was, yeah. So those are the 10 big areas, but of course there's also this region that's just named Beyond. Which is like, D&D Beyond. And that includes stuff like Chult Evermeet, which sounds really interesting. The Latest Theme, the Shah, and Sosal. So again, I think there's roughly, certainly in this the heroes of Faerûn, I think there's like 50 separate sections talking about these things individually. That's a lot, and we know that it doesn't cover. It's just streamlined as well, so we know we are very aware. But those are sort of those big areas, those sort of 10 areas, and the beyond asterisks of a couple of the places that we do not have time to cover.
Exactly. there's a good primer that we found in the Heroes of Faerûn, which is more like the player's guide version of like Faerûn. So they split these two up into 2 books. So the Adventures in Faerûn and the Heroes of Faerûn. And this Heroes of Faerûn does do this primer about these regions, which I think is really good. If you haven't got into Forgotten Realms, so you've got new to the Forgotten Realms, all you know is the big names like Waterdeep and Baldur's Gate. It's a really good way of getting into all of them. I think one of the things, I don't know if you agree with me, Fiona, I think we mentioned it off air, that potentially this talks about some really interesting places, which is actually a shame that they're not in the bigger books that we're going to go into in the sort of spaces, which is also another reason why we've kind of want to say now that we want to go further afield, because you start going into the places that are going to be in the Adventures in Faerûn, where you go the Dale Lands, Icewind Dale, and as we said, Moonshade Isles, etc. There, some of those are really interesting. I think Calimsham's really interesting. I think Icewind Dale, because we've looked at it, it's not as interesting to me, but it's still a really interesting place naturally. But I think like there's some places in here where you're like, oh, come on, I want to know more about these old empires. They sound really interesting. Living gods existing within this semi-desert land with these rich ancient cities sounds really interesting. And something really like a lot of the time in the Forgotten Realms, it plays on those old tropes of, oh, the ancient city is a ruin now. There used to be the elves that lived in Faerûn in the beginning times after the age of when the dragons were warring with the giants. Then the elves grew up and created these great cities. Most of those lie dormant now, but what's great about the old empires is you can go there and they're quite wondrous, magical, quite extreme cities of an ancient civilization that still exists. I think is really cool and something new. And as you mentioned as well, like we've looked at Thay, but I was actually so interested in the other ones in regards to Rashomon, which is like this land which is ruled by, I believe this is the right one. I'm getting, all of them are warlocks, basically.
Like warlocks and witches,
Warlocks and witches, and they've got, the ruler is an Iron Lord, chosen from amongst the berserkers by a council of mask-wearing spellcasters called Hathrans. Hathrans are leaders in many aspects of society, drawing their magic from packs with powerful spirits that dwell in the magical woodlands. That sounds pretty cool to me.
It sounds pretty cool. Yeah.
I like the idea of that one. That sounds really interesting. And then Algorand as well, being this realm of sorcerers, which is, and like this idea that there's these 3
like
cities,
magical places,
realms. Because obviously you know about Fae and the wizards and their an evil Saz-Tam and this sort of very like quite disparate reality of like the Fae, the red wizards and the Thayarchs and the Tharkions, that's it, isn't it, that sort of rule over them, whilst these other cities have realms have very completely different existences, and they're there, as they say in their own way, maintaining Thay as a sort of like stopgap to Thay taking over the world kind of thing, which is kind of really interesting. So quite a like, and it was kind of a shame that they were talked about very briefly in the Thay book we read, which was for information people out there, there's Ed Greenwood did on his own accord, it's on DM's Guild, a book all about Thay very recently, but it didn't really mentioned them in like very much in passing, but I hadn't realized the quite in-depth nature of like what goes on in those realms. So those I thought were very cool.
No, I agree. I think I'll be interested to know why they picked the ones they did to focus on specifically, and again, maybe it's mentioned in a press release somewhere or anything like that, but like the Dale Lands, Icewind Dale, Calimshan, Moonshade Isles and Baldur's Gate were the ones that are mentioned.
I think can I make my guesses?
Go for it. Yeah.
I guess that Icewind Dale and Moonshade Isles were chosen because they've already written them, probably. And I think Baldur's Gate because it's so prevalent right now and has been
we're never going to get out of Baldur's Gate. I think we're stuck in there forever.
If Baldur's Gate 3 hadn't come out, I bet it would either be Baldur's Gate or Waterdeep would be the two that it was chosen from.
I mean, we've said it on a different recording, but like the Waterdeep primer for Dragon Heist is one of the best ones, and I always 100%. Keep referring to it all the time. And again, all that sort of idea of like Volo See who's the Vola's guides as well. That's something else we were thinking about looking into later on. So that Vola's guide to the north, Vola's guide to the south coast, and see what else we can pick from there. I'll be interested. Like, I don't know why. I feel like we could have had more. I say this without reading any of them. Again, another caveat. I think we could have had more locations but shorter bits on them, perhaps.
Yeah.
But again, I maybe one place from each of these.
I totally agree.
You know?
That's what I was feeling, because like we've read the Dale Lands already, preempted it, and I think, and like I would have said when we were talking off air, like, and we'll talk about this more when we come into the Dale Lands, is that it becomes very repetitive very quickly. And I think that when you look at the Heartlands, for example, we've got Cormyr and Sembia. I particularly thought that the reason they've chosen the Dale Lands, and we'll talk about it more, is that it's very much a great place to start your adventure. Yes, it's not overwhelming. It's very as you would expect, sort of like there's gnolls and goblins all sort of attacking little villages and a very farmland with a kind of there's a couple of little mid cities, I'd say, like medium sort of towns, and then there's this ancient mega dungeon in the woodland, which is very cool, an ancient city to go around. It's very much like, here's your bog standard bits you need if you want to get going with adventures. But I felt like, as I said to you, like Cormyr has that other aspect of basic D&D fantasy adventure where it's a knightly realm, a big city, a queen on the throne. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but I think it's called Cameron in the Wheel of Time. I feel like if you read the Wheel of Time, it starts in a very Dale Land sort of place, which is like the two rivers, and then it moves into Cameron, I think it's called, which is very Cormyr is very much like coded. It's very coded from those books in the sense of like, which is a very classical fantasy city with a king, a queen on the throne, and a monarchy, and then knights, and there's these knights on purple dragons. It feels like if they'd added a bit of that in there, it would have been a bit different. Yes, it would have still been very basic fantasy adventure, but I think it would have given people a little bit more interest. And I totally agree with you. I'd rather they went and made that first bit the Heartlands, and we're going to look at 3 areas from each, and maybe Sembia with its one new city, which is kind of cool sort of story of taking land and a city-state becoming independent, and there's a lot of like political intrigue paced into there. So I don't know, I agree, I totally agree.
I think if on the flip side of it, if you didn't have time to do all 10 or 11 regions, maybe looking at the factions of the realms instead. So like the Zhentarim, for example, they have a stronghold, or they had a lot of influence in the Dale Lands, and looking at it through their lenses there, or the Emerald Enclave, or the Lord's Alliance obviously comes up quite a bit as well. Maybe that's the Cult of the Dragon, Harpers, Purple Dragon Knights is what made me think of it. Because Ed Greenwood made the setting as a place to set his stories for his childhood, and then obviously it has grown into such a big place, and so obviously people do have that nostalgia. I know when the Purple Dragon Knights, I think, subclass came out for Unearthed Arcana, people were so cross with it because it wasn't tied to the history that had been laid out. It just so happened to use it in name, and I just find that really interesting. Because I, again, know nothing about these things. I didn't grow up with these books. I didn't read them, and now I'm like, okay, what is it that I can get into it quickly? And I'm a big fan, as you know, of factions, and be like, okay, these factions are working against each other. This has got a grip here. How does that influence affect the people that live there? But also, what happens if that influence goes away? Like, again, just because we've talked about the Dale Lands, the Zhentarim recently got beaten back, and the Dale Lands have claimed back. I think it's this is where I'm going to get the wrong town now, but one of the Dales has been removed from that influence.
Moondale.
So they're trying to reestablish themselves without that, and I just think that's a really interesting way of doing it. So I always enjoy looking at the political sides and the influence, and along with maybe what the impact of magic is. Some of these places, magic is used every day. We have living gods walking between people, or alternatively, magic is banned. There is something, again, forgive me, I can't remember which region it is. There was definitely one where it's like, if you are a magic caster, we need you to make a mark on you so we can identify you when you come into the village. Which your mileage may vary on that sort of stuff, but I think it's an interesting what can we do our games differently? You know, that's
well,
not
like
starting.
we did that little look at Athkala, and for example, that is only certain registered mages may cast spells. Everyone else is illegal to cast spells, and you're not allowed into the city. If you're coming from outside, you're just not allowed in at all. So I think it's I think those stories are what is I agree. Those are things I find equally interesting, where you've got those sort of like societal political stories to sort of intrigue to play with, and where you've got systems that are, you know, like when you look at Waterdeep, that story, the different routes you can take in that vary greatly, but there's a big thread in that which is all about the previous ruler, the sort of master lord, basically embezzling the city as the key story, and that's what you're going after. And there's people all looking for this money, and you've got all these different factions involved trying to search for it. That's why I think Dragon Heist is a great introduction to adventuring in the Forgotten Realms in that sort of more cosmopolitan way. If you want to get involved in the sort of like political area and getting to know all the factions and stuff like that and how everything works, it's a really good way in, because everyone's fighting after this bit of money, and that's always quite good.
And equally, like again, from my knowledge of like Curse of Strahd, is that you know, one of the starting hooks is in the Dalelands. You're asked to go to, I believe, to Daggerfall.
And that's where the wood is, isn't it? Where
yes, exactly.
The mist was, and the mist has now receded, it says.
Yes, but like there's definitely an opening where it's like, oh, there's talk of werewolves, and you should go to Daggerfall and work it out, and that's how you get in from there. So maybe you have a couple of like pre-adventures to get everyone sort of set up. I was going to say the other big one is Phandalin, which is not really mentioned anywhere in this, but again, the starter set got used. It then had its own little campaign setting about the Shattered Obelisk, and that is obviously in the North Coast North area. But again, it's very close to the Heartlands and Dalelands, so that you can easily. That again, I think what I'm just trying to agree with you is that the North and the Heartlands, that is like, this is your starting adventure. So what would be cool to see, maybe in a couple of years' time, maybe they are going to do more books on this, is that, hey, maybe we'll have starter adventures in other places, in other realms, which have more magic heavy use or more restricted magic use, more intrigue or less intrigue. You know, like I think there's a lot to do. But I feel like it's like, and here is how we start the Dalelands, and we all go, oh.
I know.
But that's you and me. That's you and me, because we've done this so many times. So
I think that's exactly it. I think that's hit there. And I think you're right. I think they totally could. I only don't feel they would, because they haven't done it yet with any of their other settings. Like they did the whole Spelljammer thing, and then nothing else has come out for Spelljammer since. They did the whole Planescape thing, nothing else has come out for Planescape again since. So I feel like that's the thing that was great. I've mentioned it so many times on our other show, how much I do miss that sort of 2E, 3E, even 4E era, where the different realms and the different aspects of the game were given a lot of love by different teams. So you had teams just working on Forgotten Realms products continually, and you had different supplements that were only like 100 pages, 150 pages, instead of the sort of big books that they still do today, that were like constantly coming out, 4 or 5 things amongst other 4 and 5 things for different settings. So I don't feel it, maybe it will, but I'm not holding my breath for it.
I think with this whole, I think compared to the other 2 travel book series, I am like, I'm just going to go like, we'll see what happens and hope for the best. I think because before I felt more confident, I was like, yes, I really am enjoying this. Whereas here, because there's so much to it, and we're starting at the most newest end, which might not be the best entry for us.
And I think,
so I think
we found is there's a lot in those 2 ebooks we did for Planescape where we were just like, they're so rich and vibrant and well written and really interesting spaces, and it's we're yet to see. But I think that hopefully through this, if we can go into some of these older books, then I think for you folks out there that you will find more invested interest in those, because it's like, do I want to go and buy Volo's Guide from the North from 1994? Yes, you do, because it's really good. Or no, you don't, it's really bad. Do you know what I mean? And we can say, and we'll go and do all the hard work, so you don't have to.
And I think the other thing as well is like, yes, this is our version of the guide to Faerûn, but equally we might find stuff here that'd be like, that's really interesting, we'll make this our own You know, like all these things are just in things to make your own games interesting. You might not want to set your game in the Forgotten Realms or Faerûn for a number of reasons, but you might be like, I really like how this particular, like the Moonshade Isles or Kalimshan, how it is structured, how it is set. You can just take it, file off the serial numbers and all that good stuff, and go from there. And I think that's the thing is like, I know we keep going back to the point of like, we're not experts, but you know what? We all have to start somewhere. We all have to make mistakes. And I think it's just whatever interests us is what should drive us, whilst being in some sort of semi-serialized travel book club narrative that we've put on ourselves to do.
Well, that's what we're here for, right?
That's what we're here for. That's what we're here for. I think that's all I have to say. Do you have any of the final things before we set off on our journey?
Not really. Have you packed your bag properly, though?
I mean, this time I've made sure I've got all the papers, because I know some of these places we might need stuff to get across borders, or maybe we need to maybe smuggle through into a caravan. Depending. You might have been very on that joke. I will be honest. I've got my sun cream. I've got my towels. I'm ready for hitting that beach, that desert. I'm ready to,
I've got 3 t-shirts in case I spill my food down them. So don't worry.
Thank goodness. Yeah, you've got your PJs. Yeah. So I'm ready for a big old holiday. So where are we going first, Hamilton? What's our?
Well, we've already said in the thing, but we are off into the heartlands of Faerûn, into what is known also as the Dales, the Dale lands themselves. A wooded realm of plains and fields and farmlands, all surrounded by this huge forest expanse, which inside of which is hidden an ancient mega dungeon of a ruined city.
Oh, exciting! Yes, it says here like neighbors clash over borders and monsters creep out the wilds. These are lands of chivalrous knights, dastardly despots, rich and scheming merchants, and backwoods farmers just trying to make a living. So what a way to start. I was there with my bikini and my surfboard, and then we turn up in a forest.
Woolly jumpers, sticks to start walking sticks, and backpacks for us today.
Oh, I hate hiking. That is fine. But Hamilton, thank you for joining us in this our first sort of like quick intro, the prelude. There you go, prelude. There you go. That's what I was trying to say. To the Travel Book Club, the guide to Faerûn. You can find about us all in the show notes. You can go check out the sister show, which is the DM's Book Club. Which will have some of the stuff, maybe stuff that we'll refer to. We've already mentioned Fae, we've mentioned the Waterdeep and Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale. We've done a couple of other things before. Go check out them in the show notes. And we will see you next time in the Dale Lands, I guess.
See you then.
See you then.
Bye.
Bye.